Okay, granted, it was very corrupt compared to the current system, but it was back in the medieval period, to be fair. But they had a much stronger cooperative ethic than we have today. Law doesn't have to be a competition. Speaker's Corner doesn't have to be a competition. You can ask you can take turns in discussion. There was a group of Marxists in front of me just now who weren't taking turns discussing. They were talking over each other. And I think it's great that within Marxism you have all these different sects and all these different ways of thinking. It's really good. But these sects should dialogue with each other, and they should open up and learn from each other. They shouldn't try and compete.
Content over everything!
Speaker's Corner, in my experience, I've become to Speaker's Corner for 2 years. And Speaker's Corner is very hard to pin down. I think it's roughly divided 50-50 between the left and the right. And then within the left and the right, you have people who are more authoritarian and more libertarian. I've met many libertarian capitalists here. I'm very good friends with someone who considers himself a neoliberal, who's more on the opposite end of that, more authoritarian, in my opinion. And then you've got more authoritarian leftists. In contradiction to someone like me, I consider myself a libertarian socialist. You know, I don't think we should use the state to get to socialism.
Oh, okay.
You know, I think we should use grassroots neighborhood assemblies to get there.
Yeah.
Or as this gentleman might advocate, workers' councils. That would be a nice complement to that as well.
Well, you have as well, without realising. You talked about councils in being powerful. Councils is not, the Russian word for council is Soviet, as you know. All power to the Soviets is all power to the councils. If you put all power to the local councils, that's a good thing. That's what the Bolsheviks actually wanted to do. That's what the whole idea of what the revolution was about. And if you want to have workers' control and workers' democracy, you have to have it complete, not just across on a piece of paper every 5 years. You have to control of the factory, control of the housing, control of the schools, control of the national health, control of the railways, control of everything by ordinary working class people, both the people that work in those industries and those people that use them.
What this gentleman is describing is the essence of socialism. Socialism, its basic definition is when workers control the factory,
but is that not kind of
when they control the office and they control shops? That is socialism. It's not when the state runs these things.
And they own the machinery or the means of production. That is socialism.
Marx was very interested in land and labor. Land and labor, those two things. When the general public own land and labor and they control those things democratically, then we'll have real socialism. And yes, this gentleman's right, the Soviets were initially workers' councils set up to run factories in Petrograd. That's initially what they were. Sadly, their power was removed from them by Lenin when he came to power.
No, that's not what happened.
Lenin established the rule of the party.
No.
He wanted to create a labor army.
No.
Because he thought Russia was too backward for socialism. He wanted to create state capitalism.
What happened?
And in the process, he actually desecrated socialism. What we popularly call socialism in the Soviet Union was actually one big anti-socialist counter-revolution.
No, get your history right. What happened in the 1917 revolution?
Do you want to get up and speak?
Yes, I'll say.
We've rehearsed this a few times, this discussion, so you'll get the essence of what he's saying very easily.
This is a very common myth and distortion of the truth. What happened in the Russian Revolution was a genuine workers' and peasants' revolution. The Bolshevik Party led that revolution because all the other so-called left-wing parties refused to go forward to a socialist system. They backed the war against Germany, they backed the big capitalists, there was a capitalist government. When the Bolsheviks took over the revolution, that was a genuine workers' peasants' revolution. However, and this is what people must understand, the situation in Russia at that time was absolutely disastrous. Not only did it have a world war, the war of Germany, which destroyed a lot of the countryside, the farms and the land and the factories, but then immediately after the Bolsheviks took power, within a very short time, the counter-revolutionary White Guards started a counter-revolution which caused an amazing amount of destruction of the whole of Russia, the whole of the new Soviet Union. The Bolsheviks were in a very, very difficult position where the country was destroyed and they couldn't go forward to a socialist, truly socialist revolution, which had to be a worldwide socialist revolution. The socialist revolution had happened in Hungary, in Germany, in France and other countries in the world, but unfortunately the fascists and the counter-revolutionaries put all those revolutionaries down quite violently, and the White Guards, supported by the Americans and the British, by the way, and other people history don't know about, supported by those people, caused an amazing amount of destruction in the new Soviet Union. So the situation in the Soviet Union was absolutely dire. Lenin said the only way we can keep the situation going for a revolution is to have a situation called the new economic policy, which was a little retreat back to capitalism in a small-scale situation. However, Lenin always, and Trotsky and all the other Bolsheviks, wanted the revolution to spread throughout the world. However, Lenin was shot by an anarchist in 1923 and died a year later of a heart attack. When Lenin died, he said on his last will and testament, "Beware of Joseph Stalin. He's not the right person to take over the Bolshevik Party." However, when Lenin died, that will and testament was suppressed by Stalin. Stalin took over and then proceeded to annihilate the entire Bolshevik Party from the top to the bottom. It was a true counter-revolution and was not in any way communism or socialism. Now people say, "Oh, isn't it terrible? Communism failed in the Soviet Union." No, it did not. Communism was destroyed by Stalin, not by any other reasons. Stalin destroyed the revolution in Russia, and when he took over, he literally executed millions of Bolsheviks, worker Bolsheviks, and the entire Central Committee of the Bolshevik Party, and the end Trotsky himself. So that was the situation in Russia. So let no one say that communism failed. Communism was destroyed by a counter-revolution and by Stalin.
Yeah, but who turned Russia into a mega superpower? Who?
It's true, it's true. Even under Stalin, with all the Bolsheviks shot, even then, the system, the economic and political system of the Soviet Union was far superior to the West. In the West in the 1920s and 30s, there was massive unemployment and depression. In the Soviet Union, from absolutely nothing, they built up a country which was one of the most superior economic miracles in the history of mankind, in the same way as China is today. The Stalinists, even though Stalin did all the terrible things he did, the situation, the economic situation in Russia improved dramatically throughout the 30s and 40s, right up to the Second World War. At the Second World War, however, again, the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union, killed 27 million people, men, women and children, and the Soviet Union was once again lowered to a very, very bad way. Even after that, in the 1950s and 60s, under Khrushchev, when Stalin died, the Soviet Union was built up again and they put a man in space. So let's get the historical facts right. People like this will say, "Oh, communism has failed."
How many people did Stalin kill?
2.5 million. 2.5 million.
No,
I can tell you.
Out of here, it's in the tens of millions.
No, it's not.
Tens of millions. It's documented. It was documented in a French book in the 1980s called The Livre Noir de Communism.
Right.
It was written by an ex-communist, and that basically exploded
I'll tell
the
you why
myth of
you're wrong.
Stalinism.
I'll tell you why you're wrong. And I was an anti-Stalinist. I'm not going to make excuses. However, when the new modern state of Russia took over, which is now a state capitalist country, the records of the GPU were released, and it was all written down. Stalin was very, very careful about what he said, what he wrote. It was all written down. The entire total of people who went to the gulags and died.
Let him finish.
It's finished.
Let me just.
Are you telling us that you would accept, without any question, the word of a bloodthirsty dictator like Stalin? Why should we accept the word of a dictator?
No, I'm not. I'm saying the records were quite very well kept. There were 2.5 million people died. Now that's not only, no, I'm not making excuses, that's what happened.
So that's
on top of that, there were about 6 million people died in the big starvation period of the 1920s. I agree, that's what happened. However, Stalin killed I say only, but however, we know how many were died. Under the purges in the 1930s, which was the big murder period in the 1938-37, those periods of the big purges, a lot of Bolsheviks were executed. Zinoviev, Kamenev, all the Bolsheviks were executed.
Isn't this a natural consequence of socialism? That you
No,
just
it's
get
not.
more and more power to the state?
It's anti-socialism. These people that were murdered were true communists. True communists. There are more communists killed under Stalin than under Hitler. However, I'm not going to argue about numbers, because as Stalin said himself, one person's death is a terrible tragedy. 1 million people's death is just a statistic. However, let's not talk about numbers, because numbers don't mean anything to me or you. Well, if you're talking about numbers, the Americans, since the end of the Second World War, have killed an estimated 30 million people, have been responsible for the deaths of 30 million people. However, let's not talk about that. The reality is the Soviet Union is no longer a workers' state or a socialist society, it's now a state capitalist country under Putin. as far as my consider, Putin is a state capitalist. He's not a communist. So I can't stand all this anti-Russian
Surely, as a
propaganda.
member of the Labour Party, like both of us are, the issue is reform, not revolution. It's useless harking back to Stalin or Trotsky or any of these.
Reform.
It's reform. The job in hand is reform of the economy, not the destruction of the economy.
Let's just get this reform idea out. In 1945, after the Second World War, the British people voted for a Labour government, which was, as far as I'm concerned, more or less a communist government in 1945. They nationalised the railways, the coal mines, the steel industry, the banks. Everything was nationalised. Everything was nationalised, and there was it was, by today's standard, an extremely left-wing government. It was a reformist government. National Health Service, free education, free national health, enormous reform. However,
it was a truly left-wing government. It was left-wing in comparison to governments.
Yeah, it was a reform. It was a reformist government. However,
there was no red-hot revolutionary, was it?
However, if you let me finish, that reformist government, good as it was, didn't last long because what they didn't do was destroy the capitalist class as a class, because the capitalist class had no interest in the welfare state, and today proves it, because all those advantages of the welfare state and the reforms have been done away with by the Tories. And the last two episodes is education and the National Health Service. And the National Health Service and education will be privatised under this reactionary Tory government. So don't talk about reform. Reform doesn't work. The only way you're going to get a change in society is the capitalist class to be replaced by the working class. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to. You're just an ignorant person.
No, I'm not. I'm a member of the Labour Party. I'm a member. I'm not
Being a member of the Labour Party doesn't.
I'm a member of the Labour Party.
Yeah, well,
you're not, are you? Are you a member of the Labour Party?
I am actually.
Right, fine. So you're a Corbyn supporter, and you think all of the truth comes out of Corbyn's mouth. I can speak here. The fact of the matter, sir, is that your view of the 1945 government can be challenged from inside the Labour Party, and it was by Michael Young, who wrote the manifesto. You know, I mean, this is Labour history, but I mean, you have people from the 1970s who think that all you have to do is dust off the old volume of socialist cures to the economy, and it's good to go. The Labour Party's in danger of forgetting.
Let's get rid of the City of London.